Remus Lupin, in my opinion, possibly one of the most underused characters in the entire Harry Potter series. And straight off the bat, you might be thinking, what? That makes no sense. Isn't Lupin one of the most loved characters out there? Well, yes, to be honest, he kind of is. Which is why I say underused, not underrated. Because there is actually in the Harry Potter series so much more potential for Lupin than you realize that we actually see. Because so much of it is wasted. There is so much that he can actually do, and he could have played such a bigger role in the story, but he is so criminally underused. So, let me explain. Firstly, Lupin is just like a cool guy. He is basically like an uncle kind of figure to Harry through Prisoner of Azkaban, but then as soon as Prisoner of Azkaban ends and he leaves Hogwarts Castle, he really doesn't play that much of a role through any of the following books until Deathly Hallows when he dies. Which, yeah, not great, of course. But there was so much more potential for Lupin to do so many more things. For example, he's a pretty well-versed guy in the dark arts. He was literally their defense against the dark arts teacher. We could have seen him doing a lot more stuff like that to do with magic and whatever, maybe teaching Harry how to defend himself and such. And I think one big problem with Lupin's character that definitely faces is that he's overshadowed a lot of the time by Sirius. You see, when we actually see Harry and Lupin communicating in Prisoner of Azkaban, it's as if Lupin is almost a father figure to him, and he could be a father figure to him. He definitely teaches him some stuff. He's very kind, he's compassionate, he's really rational with his decisions, unlike Sirius, who's a bit of a hothead. But even then, really, Harry doesn't really go to him for anything after Prisoner of Azkaban, instead turning to Sirius, which I find really odd. For example, in Goblet of Fire, basically a few months after seeing Lupin for the last time, Harry has a bad dream of Frank, that old guy Frank, being killed by Voldemort, and his scar is hurting and he's worried. So, who do you think he should write to? He could either write to Lupin, who is a well trained guy in the Defense Against the Dark Arts, was his professor of Defense Against the Dark Arts last year. Hedwig would pretty easily probably be able to find his location, and Lupin, being the rational person that he is, would probably have a very good answer and a very good solution straight on point. Or he could write to Sirius, who is in hiding at the moment after being falsely accused of being a murderer and then being proven innocent, but then not being able to be proven innocent to anyone. So he's still on the run anyways, and Harry's only known him for a few months and only actually knew him for like a few hours, whereas he knew Lupin for like a full year. Who is the better person to go to in that situation? Of course, it would be Lupin. Lupin would probably be able to know what to do. He'd have much better chance of being able to tell Harry what to do. And that is just one example of Sirius kind of overshadowing Lupin, where it feels like Harry should have turned to Lupin, as it would have been common sense to do so, but instead turns to his godfather, who he only actually knew for a few hours. And this is no hate to Snape. This is no hate to Sirius. I quite like Sirius as a character, and I was just as sad as the next person was at his death. But it feels like he did definitely overshadow Lupin quite a bit. And also another thing to note about Lupin's character that is extremely important. Wow, does he have a tragic backstory? Like a tragic backstory, a tragic life, a sad one right from his childhood. Because of course he is a werewolf, we all know that. And in the wizarding world there is a massive prejudice against werewolves. They are literally hated. Even Ron, who is a pretty, chill, compassionate guy, he is scared of werewolves because, of course, he's grown up in that magical environment, as opposed to Hermione and Harry, who don't really see it that way. And even still, they are quite scared by werewolves. So yeah, there is a massive prejudice against them. And if it wasn't for Dumbledore being headmaster of Hogwarts at the time, it would have been very unlikely that Lupin would have even gotten a place at Hogwarts. But of course, through the compassion and the kindness of Dumbledore, he managed to get Lupin in, and he managed to teach him how to look after himself. He of course created the Shrieking Shack so that when Lupin struggled with his werewolf things, and when he turned into a werewolf, he'd be able to go there to shield himself from hurting anybody. Dumbledore really was a helpful person in that time, but it's also another example of why Lupin faced so many issues. And then he made friends with three people in particular: Peter Pettigrew, James, and Sirius. We of course know all three of them, and he was pretty good friends with them. In fact, all three of them actually went to the efforts of literally becoming animagi. Yes, they became animagus to help Lupin through this time. So when Lupin would become a werewolf, they would also turn into their animal forms, and then they would actually go on adventures together, which is what it says in Prisoner of Azkaban, which is pretty cool, against Dumbledore's orders, but even then they would literally go out on adventures and sometimes scare the people of Hogsmeade. They were close friends, and Lupin finally found people he could talk to, friends, until in one night all three of them were wiped out, just like that. Pettigrew was killed by Sirius, or supposedly killed by Sirius, and then James was killed by Voldemort, who was actually conspiring with Sirius, apparently. Think about that. In one night, Lupin didn't just lose one friend, he didn't lose two, he lost three. Two of them supposedly dead, one actually dead, and one was apparently a murderer, a serial murderer who also killed over 10 muggles and betrayed his best friend, James. And now is in life in Azkaban. What that would have been possibly one of the worst times of Lupin's life. Can you imagine that? That would have actually been horrendous. Like, it would have. Imagine how much that would have hurt. Imagine how hard that time would have been for him to go through that, losing all of his friends, the people that he could actually finally be safe around, the people who accepted him for who he was, and he lost them in a split second. And then he went through years and years of agony after losing Sirius and James and Peter, thinking that one of his friends had betrayed the other two, had betrayed all of them really, and had turned against them and turned to Voldemort, until, of course, he gets proven wrong, and he realizes that Sirius was never actually the bad guy, and it's Peter Pettigrew was. And the relief we see on his face in Prisoner of Azkaban when he realizes that Sirius is the good guy in all of this, it's great to see. It's absolutely brilliant, and it's just another example of how much Lupin has gone through, how much he's had to lose, how much he gained through getting new friends and then losing them. It is heartbreaking. Right from his childhood, he struggled because of his werewolf abilities, and then to be able to be controlled by his friends, they helped him through that time, and then to lose them, heartbreaking. And I feel like, especially in the movies, there isn't a big enough concentration on Lupin as a whole. Even his relationship with Tonks, his son Teddy, there is just not enough on them because they are such interesting characters who have been through so much, and it feels like they should be focused on a lot more. For example, one thing with Lupin is that after Prisoner of Azkaban in the movies, we don't see him in Goblet of Fire. We see him a bit in Order of the Phoenix because of course he's part of the Order. We only see him tiny bit in Half-Blood Prince when he's at the Burrow, and he doesn't really do much there either. And then we only see him pretty much like a couple of times again until Deathly Hallows Part 2, when he passes away, when he gets killed in the Battle of Hogwarts. And even then, we only see a few seconds of him on screen lying side by side with Tonks after their death. And yeah, it's like there was just so much that Lupin could have done and should have done. There should have been so much more of him in both the movies and the books, but particularly the movies, because wow, was he underused in the movies. He's such an underused character in that sense. But anyways, that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Darth Sauron, out.